Hello and welcome back. Melissa here, diving once again into my awakening story. And a few things before I start. I don't know what's going on with my camera, so sorry that it's all fuzzy, but really you can just close your eyes and listen to the story. You don't need to watch me. And the second thing is, you know, I was hesitant on sharing this story because I wrote this 2.5 years ago, and we we only know that which we know, in accordance to where we're at in our journey. And so much happened since the time I wrote this. And I was feeling, like, oh my gosh, I need to add so much more to it. And, maybe things have shifted and blah, blah, blah. But then I figured, if like with anything, if we wait until we're absolutely ready and things are perfect, we could be just waiting forever. And story of my life. So figured I'd share what it was, how it is, and, you know, perhaps it'll help someone where they're at in their journey. So, again, my intention is to share this, and if it connects to somebody's heart and helps them along their path, that's what it's about. So, let's dive back in. Before we dive any deeper into my story, I want to make a few things clear. Up until my mid 30s, my life was operated by my wounded warrior. Much of my early life story was created through a heavily skewed perception stemming from a dominant victim mentality. I rarely saw the big picture, much less the truth of my own reality. Having gratitude and compassion for the challenging stuff, the relationships and situations related to family, work, romance, myself, was not part of my repertoire. Even though I come from an extremely generous and loving family, the dynamics within our family unit help set the stage for my life's most challenging lessons. If not for them, I obviously would not be the person I am today. I am truly blessed and privileged to have been given the childhood I had, and I don't take any of it for granted. Likewise, I hold each and every one of my romantic partnerships near and dear to my heart, and I am so grateful for everything they have provided to my life. It is with utmost respect and the highest regards I reflect upon all who have been a part of my journey. In hindsight, I recognize all of the gifts I've been given. However, I think I can speak for most people that we don't always see it in this way. I would also like to state that the insights and wisdom I have gained and will share have been channeled from higher dimensions of consciousness, which I have gained access to by diving deep into myself, exploring my shadows, in hopes of gaining a better understanding of why life is the way it is. Therefore, what I share is also based upon my individual perception and truth gained from my personal experiences. If what I share doesn't resonate with you, then please do not accept it as your truth. We all walk through life using our unique set of eyes with our own unique antennas. As we ascend, expand our awareness, and raise our consciousness, we must learn how to use discernment as we relate to everyone and everything outside of ourselves. Just because someone has a specific view on something doesn't make it the ultimate truth, especially if it doesn't sit well within you. That said, it doesn't make it untrue either. When feelings of dissonance arise, know that you are being offered an opportunity to explore them deeper rather than simply jumping to judgment of the source from which they are delivered. All I ask is that you continue listening with an open mind and an open heart and feel what comes up for you. As with anything you hear or see or read out in the world, take what resonates and leave the rest. I definitely explored a spectrum of experiences in my life, searching for something or aha moment that would allow everything to finally click into place and then it would all make sense. I'm the type of person who has to experience something for myself before I'm able to formulate my own opinion about it. In my formative years, if someone told me not to do something, it would probably be the quickest way to get me to do it. Overall, I was very smart and had excellent morals, but I was also extremely passionate, curious, determined, stubborn, rebellious, and with a few other colorful adjectives added to the mix. I wanted to do everything myself. There was a certain nursery rhyme my parents lovingly and jokingly used to say was written about me. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. I challenged the authority when something didn't seem just or fair. I wanted to live life on my terms. I wanted to understand why certain things were coined good or bad, right or wrong. I needed to feel the sensation provoked in my body by way of experience. And I would be the only one to determine how I felt about people, places, and things. If I wanted to experience something, it was my decision to do so, not based on anybody else's opinion or persuasion. That said, if you looked at the slew of choices I made growing up, specifically in the arenas of self love and self worth, you'd probably wonder why on earth I chose to experience certain emotional patterns over and over and over and over again. Say hello to my karmic wounds. From a very young age, I had an affinity towards otherworldly things, psychics, angels, spirit guides, and metaphysical concepts were definitely points of interests. I collected crystals. I had a vivid imagination. My family considered me a natural healer and the giver of the ultimate foot rub with my magic hands. I was able to sense and feel on myself what the other person needed. I also had a very bizarre nightly ritual I often ponder about, where I would take a snack with me to bed, usually a slice of cheese. And as I lay down, after saying all of my prayers, I would pretend that I was dying. The snack was my only remaining life force, so I would eat it very slowly. And as I did, I would imagine all of my loved ones and friends coming to say goodbye to me. Super weird, I know. My stubborn curiosity made for not the most pleasant of times growing up under the same roof as my mom, dad, and brother. I was the black sheep of the family. I made my own rules and marched to the beat of my own drum. I gave my parents a run for their money, especially in my teenage years. I fought for every injustice. And my brother, on the other hand, would just stay out of it. His quiet and easygoing attitude was admirable. I couldn't understand how he always seemed to be able to remain so calm and not allow things bother him. And to be honest, it irritated the crap out of me. It seemed like he could get away with anything and do no wrong when there I was being burned at the stake. Part of me was jealous, another part was angry, And then another part was proud and protective, with the honorable duties of providing encouragement, support, and tough love as a big sister. I had such a tumultuous relationship with my parents when I was younger. When they yelled, I yelled louder. When they argued with each other, I'd get in the middle and argue with each of them. Many doors were slammed and many tears were shed. Looking back, I can see how they were doing the best that they could. Not only were they living out their own soul journeys, navigating their way through their personal wounds and shadows and life, but they were also trying to look out for me, protect me, and give me the best of what life could offer, though I didn't see it that way at the time. I have so much compassion for them now and how they must have felt, having an intelligent and beautiful daughter full of potential, yet who continuously found herself in unideal situations and relationships ending in heartbreak. I know now how much they loved me. In those times, I would have given anything just to crawl into their arms and be held, but my young adult pride held me back. Their love, comfort, and support would have made all the difference in those moments of despair. But since we all had different love languages, any attempts made were lost in translation. So began my long journey of hiding behind a mask. I masqueraded who I truly was, what I truly needed, and how I truly felt, while my shadow self, angry, resentful, unworthy, and sad, began to grow. To anyone looking in from the outside, the way I felt probably wouldn't make much logical sense. How could a girl who has so much going for her be so sad? How could a girl who has everything feel like she isn't loved? How can the girl who's been given so much be so ungrateful? I felt misunderstood. I felt like I was oil and that my parents were water. I felt like I couldn't talk about certain things in fear of starting a fight or having my privileges be taken away. I learned at a young age that some things were best left unsaid. Little did I know that I was setting myself up for some pretty destructive patterns later on by muting my voice as to be left unheard. The throat chakra is the energy center through which we freely express our thoughts and feelings. It becomes blocked and shuts down, creating a massive roadblock in our energetic highway system when we choose to not express the truth of our hearts. Oftentimes, it's rooted in fear from it not being safe to speak. False beliefs around judgment, unworthiness, and shame begin stemming from that, thereby always providing us with another reason or excuse to hold in that which wants to be let out. It's like having a pair of invisible hands around our throats. Not only that, but whenever we bite our tongue or swallow the things we want to say rather than express them, the energy attached to those lingering feelings can, with time, prove to be quite harmful to our bodily organs and tissues. Our throats, stomachs, livers, intestines, bladders, or any other organ designed to store, filter, or release energy begin harvesting the energetic imprints of fear, angerness, bitterness, grief, sadness, etc., leading eventually to a physical manifestation. We start clogging up our plumbing system, resulting in energetic detours. We begin hoarding our emotions from a very young age. By not having healthy outlets through which to express ourselves and our lack of understanding as to how important it is for our emotions to be felt, seen, and heard, we set ourselves up for pain, dis-ease, and disharmony within ourselves and within our life's experiences. Perhaps you remember the first time you learned to keep your mouth shut. I'm not a developmental psychologist, But I think it's safe to say that many behaviors are learned in our childhood and early adolescent years. Maybe you can remember a time when you freely said something that wasn't met with a pleasant response. Or maybe it was through observation that gave you the ability to deduce what, when, and if it was safe to express yourself. Can you even begin to imagine the amount of unexpressed emotions, denied desires, and unspoken words we have stored within our bodies by shutting down our authentic voices as children? It is so important to understand that your emotions are valid and are nothing to be ashamed of. Feeling stuff doesn't make you any more or less of a person, whether you think those feelings make sense or not. Feelings and emotions are not to be judged. Many of us are taught from a young age to keep quiet. Males, in particular, are taught to suck it up, be strong, be a man, only the weak cry, and so on. Having emotions is one of the main things that makes us human. Rather than trying to escape the uncomfortable emotions, allow them to flow through you. Give yourself time to feel every ounce of them as they sift through your being. Don't rush it. Instead, just surrender and give yourself permission to really roll around in them, and have some compassion for yourself as you do so, because you're worthy of that. How many of us know this, though, when we're 7 or 15 or 25? Dare I say, not many, regardless of our age. As I write this, the world is in global lockdown from COVID-19, and the fear, panic, and uncertainty floating around in the collective mind is palpable. We don't realize that even before this crisis, humanity was already facing a pandemic, that of people pleasing, guilt, sadness, shame, and fear. Harvesting all of that dense, low vibratory emotional gunk is what'll kill you over time. Or if agitated enough, will result in an explosion of violence and rage for some. We must allow ourselves to fully feel emotions as they arise without judgment, and then allow them to flow through us. You may have heard how the word emotion can be broken down into emotion, energy in motion, stemming from the Latin word emotere. Emotions are designed to be felt and to flow. This is where the two very different Eastern and Western healthcare philosophies overlap. From the chakra system to the meridians, their associated elements and emotions, to their placement and location on the actual physical human body. It is all intricately connected, and it offers a map as to how the energies from the outside world affect our internal world. We are the maestros of a brilliant divine instrument. It is truly fascinating. Unfortunately, I wasn't the best maestro. I wasn't taking proper care of my instrument, nor was I investing any time into practicing it. I set my instrument aside while I created a mixtape. You remember those that we recorded from the radio? Some songs began halfway through, or there was a random commercial in between tracks, and you'd have to fast forward and rewind a bunch of times to get to the point you actually wanted to listen from. In other words, I was a complete disaster for a massive chunk of my life. I wasn't aware of the potential I had to create grand symphonies because I was too busy getting distracted by attempting to record songs being sung by somebody else. I created the most random mixtape you could imagine, which ended up being the soundtrack for a series of events where I danced with the devil through alluring and twisted paths of dark shadows. I definitely played with fire and put myself in situations that had the potential to burn me alive. I know how lucky I am, and I'm grateful for the protection I had from my heavenly guides. Throughout my 20s and early 30s, I suffered from depression, anxiety, low self esteem, eating disorders, addiction, and countless codependent relationships, all of which left me victim to my own self hatred and shame. There were times I wondered if I was going to see the light again and if I would ever make it out of the tricky labyrinth I found myself in the middle of. There were times I wondered if I'd ever find true love, happiness, success. I wondered what all my curiosity and exploration was for, if it was just going to keep leading me to the same dead ends and disappointments. There were times I felt so homesick for a place I didn't even know existed, but one that my heart ached to return to. At times, I was unsure if I was ever going to find my way through it all. My faith and trust in an elusive grand purpose and in a higher power that was guiding me, with an obscure understanding that this power was already within me and that I was a part of, is ultimately what led me out of the darkness and through my awakening. From the time I developed my first boy crush in the second grade up until my mid 30s, my life was centered upon the sole mission to find love. There was crush after crush, boyfriend after boyfriend, countless notebooks and diaries filled with scribblings of, I heart so and so forever, fulfilling the societal norms of getting married, having a successful career, buying a house with a white picket fence, having two kids and a dog was of utmost importance. Of all the boxes to be checked, finding Mr. Right was at the top of the list. When this did not come to fruition, despite my best efforts and incessant prayers, I became the guest of honor at the raging self pity party I threw for myself. I threw this party so many times, joined at first by a few friends who attended in commiseration, but after a while, the party got old. Looking back, I can see how many times spirit showed up in camouflage, hoping that I'd begin to see that nobody or no thing would ever save me. I put so much effort into creating this fairy tale life for myself that I was completely blind to the fact that in order to create the dream life I sought, it needed to be designed within me. In order for my Prince Charming to show up in my outer world, I had to become my own Prince Charming. If I wanted an epic love story, I had to value myself worthy of having one and to not abandon or betray my own heart in the process of writing it. Rather than chasing after my happily ever after, I had to live each day in gratitude as it already was my reality. I had a ton of heart chakra healing work to do on myself, and my beloved divine counterpart wasn't going to show up until I cleaned it up from all the emotional gunk it had been collecting throughout the years. Unbeknownst to me, I had an invisible neon sign over my head that read, I am unworthy, insecure, and lack self love. I was oblivious as to how I was showing up in my relationships, and I was without any accountability. I slept walk through the early part of my life without paying close enough attention to the divine guidance existing all around me. Every perceived failure and heartbreak was a message for me to start loving myself, forgiving myself, accepting my flaws, and believing I am worthy of having my dreams come true. Unfortunately, the message weren't as loud and clear as I apparently needed them to be, so it took me decades before I finally received them. I guess better late than never. In 2012, I started to wake up And although I wasn't aware of this terminology at the time, I'd say it was when the initial phases of my ascension process commenced. I became even more curious and found myself diving deeper down the spiritual rabbit hole. I was reading more about mysticism, astrology, different religions, and the occult. I developed a deeper relationship with my body and with nature. I started to have a more expansive view of life and started to recognize the signs and synchronicities, the breadcrumbs, if you will, that spirit was placing in my field. I did my best to follow them, but sometimes those crumbs were a little too far for me to comfortably reach. At times, it required me to make some hops and leaps that I wasn't quite ready for, which led me around yet another loop within the labyrinth where I was introduced to even more skeletons and traversed even darker corners. And I will pause there. Stay tuned for more of my story. And thank you again for all of you who are spending this time with me and listening. I love you so much. Big hugs from my heart into yours. Bye bye.